Well, good morning, folks. Welcome to another edition of Friday Morning Live. Today is November the 12th, 2021. Hope everybody had a nice Veterans Day. Some of us were lucky enough to get a few hours off yesterday at the office, but it sounds like on our pre-call here this morning, some of us were pretty busy doing home projects. So, but again, welcome to today's topic, FAIA's E&O department discussing policy enhancements to your Swiss Re Westport policy. Keep in mind as we go through the presentation today that all these enhancements become effective February the 1st, 2022. I can't believe we're saying that, but we are. So I'm going to run through just a couple housekeeping items, and then we'll turn to our friends from the E&O department, and they'll join me for the presentation today. So there's yours truly. Just a reminder, we continue to have everything online at this point, but the calendar is now being updated. So we will be doing some in-person classes on for education beginning in January. So check the calendar over the next month, 45 days, and you'll see some dates. It is limited. It is a limited calendar. We're not going to be all around the state, but we will be in some areas, and hopefully you can come see us in person. So just keep that in mind. Capital days, we're going to keep reminding you about this because there's a lot at stake this year and probably the next year and the next year and the next year. But this year for sure, there's been, with some of the changes from last session, some of that's working, but certainly we always have to look ahead and see what else needs to be tweaked. So please get your rooms for Capital Days, 24th through the 26th of January. Look forward to seeing everybody in Tallahassee, but there's just a lot going on, and BG and Laura and Kyle and certainly our outside lobbyists are very busy right now with committee weeks and other things that are going on, discussing the Florida property market and some other things. So upcoming shows. So again, a reminder, our next show is December the 10th, where we will have Laura and BG on talking about FAI's legislative agenda and some of the things that they're seeing in the marketplace and some of the things that they're seeing legislatively that we need to address. So just put that on your calendar. You'll see a reminder, but next show for Friday Morning Live is December the 10th. Let's see what the next slide is. All right, let's bring in our guests this morning, Amanda Chatham and Kevin Mangan. Good morning.
Morning, Dave.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So, folks, these are our guests. And we'll go into a little bit about the rest of the team here in a second. I'm going to transition the slides. So if you guys would just kind of, Amanda, just kind of say, how long you've been with FAIA and just a little bit about what you do here as far as the team and also your title, official title, is operations manager for both the E&O program and our umbrella program. So just as I transition, just say a few words about that, please, ma'am.
Sure. So I've been at FAIA for just over 8 years now, I believe. So I run our E&O program, our department, especially our internal department where we've got some of our internal underwriters where we have underwriting authority through Westport Swiss Re. And then we also work with some of our outside markets as well through our brokers. And then we've got our RLI umbrella department as well. So that one, as most of you know, we have our personal umbrella program there and then our home business product in that.
Okay. And Kevin, just, now that you're the official sales manager for the E&O team. So just, many of you know Kevin from his previous days, his previous life before he joined FAI, but certainly he has hit the ground running here and just recently he's been elevated to the sales manager position here at FAI.
Right. I'm still the rookie of the FAIA staff. I came on board with BG and Lance, but I've been involved with FAIA for the last 20-something years. I was on the agency side for 23 years, I think it was. Got tired of getting beat up, so I joined FAIA.
Yeah. So now we can beat you up even more.
Right.
Right.
So, but let's show the team here. Amanda, put that up there, and we'll go to the next slide and show the team. So, Ashley, fortunately for us, she's had a baby, so
Yes.
she's out on maternity leave, but
Right.
she helps out behind the scenes. So
Right.
some agents may not deal with her, but what's her responsibility here with FAIA?
Right. So she does. She works more so with our internal folks, kind of just helping them process everything. So she works a lot directly with Rachel, Matt, and myself as we're underwriting accounts and working on them. So she kind of does a lot of the back end stuff for us to make the process a lot easier for us. So some folks do get correspondence from her. Potentially about their application, or if they're going to be an automatic renewal with Westport or for specialties. So some folks will get some stuff from her, but not as often maybe as some of our underwriters.
As often as Rachel. So Rachel's one of our underwriters,
Yes.
been with us a few years, does a great
Mhm.
job, and
Yes.
certainly those that deal with Rachel, luckily that's a good combination. And she works mostly with what salesperson.
So she works in our South Florida territory with JP.
Okay.
So JP Gomez, who's the South Florida sales rep, he and Rachel are a team that work together on those accounts.
Okay. And then Matt's been with us a few years,
Mhm.
and certainly, and he is Kevin's sidekick, I suspect.
Yes. So Kevin and Matt work together in the North Florida territory on those accounts. And so both teams really, they work very well together, and they've got it down for their territories.
Right.
So.
Right. And then what role does Jamie play in our operation from an E&O perspective?
So Jamie handles any of our solicitations that go out for all of our renewals. She processes incoming applications and then sends the renewal applications out. Any certificate requests, that's Jamie. Any invoicing questions or processing the invoices, finance agreements, things like that, that's Jamie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the team, folks. And
Yes.
certainly you'll hear from Amanda and Kevin quite a bit this morning, of course, but wanted to show you the rest of the team. And certainly if you have any questions or you need to reach somebody, there's some email addresses, but you can certainly reach out directly to Amanda or Kevin.
Right.
And they'll be glad to assist there as well. So let's get into today's discussion. Okay. Our friend Kevin, who said he was on the agency side for 23 years. And so he has seen a lot of ups and downs. So, we really concentrate on the property market for the most part, but certainly all other lines of business are being impacted by what's going on,
Right.
not only just in Florida, but nationally and some places internationally. So in professional liability, I don't think has been, separated out. I think they still have some challenges, and some in the marketplace are feeling that. And Westport certainly has been truly tested over time. But Kevin, a brief overview of, what's happening in the marketplace currently from this space, from an E&O perspective.
Sure. The E&O space, specifically for insurance agencies, has really been in a state of turmoil. We've, over the last couple of years, have seen multiple insurance carriers leave the space. The ones that have remained, for the most part, have been drastically increasing pricing, and even including COVID exclusions on their renewals and new business for the last couple of years. Luckily, Westport has remained very stable. They've had a rate decrease over the last couple of years, and as you'll see in this presentation, has enhanced the policy forms.
Yeah.
So they're performing very well, and we're very happy that that they haven't gone the way of the other carriers.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about Westport, Swiss Re, and certainly we'll get into more of that, but just financially, the way they do things, the way they conduct themselves, the way
Right.
they support independent agents, and specifically members of the Big I and FAIA. So I think that just is a telling sign of their willingness to continue to play in this marketplace competitively and always looking for ways to support the independent agent. And we'll go through some of those today by these enhancements. So, Kevin, I said February 1st, and we're going to keep talking about that. Excuse me, Amanda's going to do this one. But, people are going to be wondering, okay, do I have to wait to my renewal
Right.
in order for some of these enhancements to take effect? So,
Yes.
Amanda, what say you?
So as you mentioned earlier, Dave, so all these changes are going into effect February 1st, 2022. So the good part is that Westport does have a liberalization clause in the policy. So that means as long as you're an active policyholder, you will also get these enhancements effective February 1st, 2022.
So my policy renews in May?
Yep. Your policy renews in May. You don't have to wait to your renewal. You'll automatically have the coverages. You won't obviously see the written wording in your policy,
Right,
but you'll
right.
have the coverages
Yeah.
if you need to utilize any of them. And then once you renew in May, you'll actually see the update to your policy form.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, folks, February 1, 2022, and the ability for current policyholders to take advantage of these
Right.
even prior to their renewal.
Yes.
So, all right, Kevin, hammer clause.
All right.
This definitely is, in some cases, a misunderstood provision in the policy, especially for professional liability coverages. And now we're talking specifically E&O. So, the hammer clause as it relates to a Westport policyholder. What do we say here?
Okay, good question. Well, first, Swiss Re has removed the hammer clause under their Westport policies for in-force policies. And I think we can all agree it has the coolest name out of all the provisions in our industry. But the hammer clause, to understand it, you really need to talk about consent to settle. Because these E&O claims deal with your reputation as an agent, most E&O policies will have a consent to settle clause within the policy, meaning the carrier needs your consent to settle that claim. Now, the hammer is the insurance carrier's leverage to encourage you to settle. So in most policies, the hammer clause is 80-20 in the favor of the carrier.
Right.
So, and we'll go through an example of how this works.
Well, we're going to do that now. So,
but again, Westport has removed this provision in the in-force policies. So going to the example, if let's just, and this is for a normal hammer clause in a policy. It's 80-20 in the favor of a carrier. The carrier would like to settle the claim for $200,000. The insured refuses because it's their reputation. They don't think they did anything wrong. They want to fight it. The carrier says, okay, that's your right. But anything above that $200,000, whether it's judgments or defense costs, you're going to have some skin in the game. So in this case, if a carrier could settle the claim for $200,000, you fight it. The carrier is only going to pay 20% of that overage of the $200,000. So if the claim ends up being a $400,000 claim, the carrier is going to pay $240,000, and the insured is going to be responsible for the other $160,000.
Which again, in today's dollars or any dollars, it's pretty significant. So that's why you got to have these conversations and discuss this and lay all this out there, because the insured could be, the agent insured could be very heavily impacted by that decision. So, okay. But the key to this, again, Kevin, is Westport has removed the hammer clause
for enforced
policies.
Exactly.
So, okay. All right, Amanda. Unfortunately, we've had some insolvencies here in the state of Florida, and the questions continue. I got 3 today on Gulfstream. And so even though they are insolvent, the questions can consistently come in here to FAI. But one thing that we do know about Westport is they have a very good insolvency clause and language to help agents. And we talk this, carve back.
Right.
So just kind of walk members through this that are on this call today about what this insolvency coverage carve back is for a Westport policyholder.
So as you said, it is an important coverage to look at in your E&O policy, especially because we are in Florida and we have seen insolvencies occur with carriers. So Westport does have a coverage carve back for this. So what they have changed with their enhancements is they've broadened this so that with the carve back, previously for non-admitted carriers, their AM Best rating had to be B+ or higher. So now it is B or higher for those AM Best ratings of the non-admitted carriers. So essentially, within the policy language, if you've got an admitted carrier backed by the guarantee fund or a non-admitted carrier rated B or higher by AM Best, that's where you have that coverage carved back. The exclusion doesn't apply. Now we do have, as we currently do, an endorsement available for the insolvency to basically cover that gap. If you are working with a carrier that either doesn't have an AM Best rating or is rated less than B by AM Best. For instance, if your agency is working with Frontline Unlimited, we have this endorsement available, excuse me, to cover basically all non-admitted carriers, no matter their rating. So it is available at an additional charge, but it gives you that gap in coverage if you do have that instance where you're working with some of those carriers.
Yeah. So it does give you a peace of mind. We mentioned Frontline Unlimited because that's a carrier that has come to us and we work through some of this. So Amanda, does the carrier rating affect how my policy responds to an E&O claim?
No. So really when you're talking about the carrier ratings, you're really needing to look at this insolvency language. That's the the important piece of it. If you do have a normal, error or omission claim come from one of your carriers that you write with, your policy is going to respond as it normally would. They're not going to look at the actual carrier rating.
All right, Ed, I'm going to come back to the hammer clause, but since we're on topic here, what about Demotech? How does that play? Ed's asking about what about Demotech rated carriers?
So basically, if you have a carrier that is admitted back by the guarantee fund, they could be rated by Demotech or they could be not rated at all. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
As long as they're admitted. Now, if you're talking about a non-admitted carrier that's rated by Demotech, then you would need this endorsement to cover that gap because it would need to be rated by AM Best, B or higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Ed, that's the question about Demotech. And of course, most of the Florida domestics in this state are rated by Demotech. They do not have an AM Best rating. So good question. So let's move on to regulatory defense. Folks, agents get requests all the time, and some, unfortunately, come from the department. And many of you have taken a class from David Thompson, and he refers to this a lot as the black van. For our purposes here, there is no black van that will be pulling up, but you will get.
You never know.
That's right. That's right. Depending on, but most of the time, you're going to get a phone call or an email, or you're going to get served something. And the regulator is looking at certain things because they are investigating something. Sometimes they're forthcoming, but many times they're not. But Kevin, how does Westport, because they have had to look at this because they deal with this on a pretty regular basis, how has Westport decided to deal with this from a coverage standpoint and enhancing the policy?
Right. First, the important thing to remember here is this is not going to pay for any fines or judgments against you by the state. This is just defense coverage Most carriers will put $5,000 or $10,000 of regulatory defense coverage. Westport used to have $60,000 in defense coverage, but now they've bumped that up to $100,000. So if your agency or an employee of your agency is being investigated by a regulatory body, we're going to pay for the attorney.
Yep.
And there's no longer a deductible for this coverage, and it's in addition to the policy limits. So it's not going to erode any liability limits for you.
Yeah, I think those are three great points. 100,000, no longer subject to deductibles, and it's in addition to your whatever your policy limit is currently. So I think those are three key points. And so again, any questions? And folks, we recommend you pop some questions in here, and we'll get to as many as we can. And could you give an example of a type of claim that an employee would have been alleged to have done? So from a regulatory standpoint, let's just get into regulatory. A lot of times, from what we see, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but the questions that we get in education is they want to see a copy of a policy. They want to see copies of notes. They want to see text messages, things where there's something going on. They want to see what that interaction is between the employee and the client and or a carrier, because there's something that became a little off there, and they're only responding to you and making these requests because they've received a complaint.
Exactly.
So Kevin, take it from there.
I think you just said it. But
Okay.
It's usually a complaint by one of your insureds to the state of Florida, and the state is usually going to investigate that and make sure there's no wrongdoing.
Yep.
So in that case, you really want an attorney or somebody backing you up to make sure you're not going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, and that just brings up a great point. What if I find myself in this situation, Kevin? What is the best practices? What are we recommending an agent that has a Westport policy? What should they do?
Right. Well, you definitely don't want to stick your head in the sand. You want to let us know or let Westport know directly, so they can be with you from day one. Just hold your hand through the whole process.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really the key. Engage us. Like I say, we get the calls in education. We
Right.
turn them over to E&O. They turn them over to Westport. So if you find yourself in this situation, please get us engaged as early as you can. Kevin brings up a great point, because we have had some agents that have decided to take a stand on this, that they don't think they're involved. They don't think there's a problem. So they just ignore it. That's really not the best course of action when you're getting by your regulator is asking for something. You probably need to, respond in a timely manner. So.
And we've got a Florida claims specialist with Swiss Re that you can always call and kind of talk through it with her, just to kind of understand what's the best steps to take and what to provide and how to handle it.
Yep. So, yeah. And, keep popping the questions in there, but we'll keep moving. So, in today's world, Amanda, mergers and acquisitions is part of our everyday life here at FAIA.
Yes.
We learned of a few more recently, and I'm sure they'll continue as time wears on, where agents have decided to, partner with somebody else. But I think Westport started to look at this and take a real close look at how they can really separate themselves for what others in the marketplace are doing, and make it easier on those agents that are in this position. Yeah.
So this really is a great benefit that they've added here. So essentially, like you said, we see it fairly frequently in our area, where we'll get contacted that one of our agency policyholders has purchased a book of business. So what they've done is, if that book that you're purchasing, if the revenues of that book are 15% or less, they don't exceed 15% of your total revenue, then you don't have to endorse the policy midterm to account for that acquisition. So, but there's going to be a situation too where you maybe have created a DBA name or another entity name as a result of that acquisition. So you can let us know once that occurs so that we can endorse the policy to at least add that name, just so you've got it listed on your policy. But what we'll do is at renewal, we'll take into account any of the acquisitions you've experienced over that current policy term. So the good news is you don't have to pay for them on the current policy term. You're just paying for them at renewal going forward.
Okay. Well, one question that just comes to mind, most insureds get a certificate
Right.
at renewal, and they send it to the different entities that need it.
Mhm.
Now you've acquired somebody.
Right.
So how can you provide proof of coverage now that you have this new entity?
So a lot of what we usually suggest is kind of just like you said, we'll get a certificate and it's going to have on it your primary named insured. And then along with that certificate, you can provide copies of the endorsements that show the additional named insureds to those different carriers or brokers or anybody that you're working with that has requested copies of that coverage.
Okay. And when it's handled midterm, that's fine too. I mean, we
Right.
just build that into our workflow. And
yes, because the same thing. Once you notify us, we'll add that name, and it'll generate an endorsement that you can include with the certificate.
So at this point, we're not asking for a supplement.
Right. So basically, midterm, we will no longer need that acquisition supplement. That's something that'll then be taken care of at renewal. So make sure, though, because that is something now that's taken care of at renewal, make sure you account for that, account for any extra time so that we can process that, and just know that it'll be handled at that point.
So that supplement at renewal, and
Mhm.
that's when premium will be adjusted.
Right.
Okay. So keep in mind, please let us know.
Yes.
We'll provide any certificates that need to be provided with the additional names, and no supplement midterm, but you have to be prepared to provide it at renewal, and that's when premium will be adjusted.
Right.
So, but I think the other key to this is the 15%
Yes.
rule, so to
Right,
speak.
right.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
yeah, because if you do have a situation where
Yep.
it's over 15%, then we will handle it like we do now. We'll do the acquisition supplement term and endorse the policy.
Yeah. So just keep
Yeah.
that in mind as you're
Yeah.
acquiring entities. So,
And same thing if you happen to acquire an entity that maybe does something unique that you don't currently do in your agency, if there's mutual fund sales on there, if you don't have that coverage on your policy now, we do need to make sure we endorse
Correct.
it to add
Right,
that if
right.
that's something that you do buy.
okay. All right. Cool. So, and certainly many on this call, and certainly in our fold at FAI with our members, deal with PEOs, and some deal with it personally because they own one, and some have a broker relationship. So, these are some things that Westport took a look at because they saw the landscape and they wanted to make this a little bit easier for agents to deal with these arrangements, so to speak.
Exactly. And you're right, Dave. This is more and more prevalent. Many agencies are using PEOs. The two endorsements that Westport has had for quite some time now, the regular PEO endorsement. So if you have a direct marketing referral agreement with a PEO, this was the endorsement that would be put on your policy with a premium charge to it. And the second one is the PEO broker referral endorsement, which is if you're going through a PEO broker and don't have that direct contract with a PEO. So both these endorsements were used and were, again, there was a premium charge with it. But because it's so prevalent right now, Westport has decided just to include this into their policy language. So there's no charge for it. It's automatically included into the policy form now. So we will no longer use these endorsements.
So don't want anybody to feel like they don't still have to tell us about this. I mean, we want to know if you're dealing. We don't want to know. Okay. My apologies. I
It's
thought
such
we.
a common occurrence.
Oh,
now.
so we don't want to
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Well,
don't-
right. So I mean, really, it's and that's the main difference. It does. It's a big benefit. You don't have to remember
Okay.
to request
Okay.
these now.
All right.
It is in the language. I mean, you do want to look at the policy language, make sure you're meeting any of the conditions. But yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So from an underwriting standpoint, we're good to go. All right. My apologies. So dealing with deductibles, we all, you said you provided that example earlier about the hammer clause, and we'll get back to Ed's question at the end about the hammer clause. He had one, but deductibles are a big part of your E&O program.
Right.
That you have to have these discussions with
Yes.
your salesperson and certainly your underwriter as you look to see how you want to position yourself and your agency. So again, Westport looked at this and is providing some options for
Yes.
agents.
Right. So currently, in the current policy, they have one option to reduce your deductible. So what they've done with these enhancements is they've now have a total of 3. So the current one that we have is here, and then we'll go through 2 more slides with the
Right,
new
right.
options. So with this, they're going to take the largest of these 3 options up to a maximum of $25,000 of what your deductible could be reduced or completely waived, depending on what it is. So the current deductible reduction option is basically if you're maintaining that, I mean, you hear it all the time in all of our E&O classes, if you're maintaining that written documentation of the refusal of a client to accept any type of coverage or a limit that was offered. So if you have a situation arise, but you have that written documentation that you offered it to them and they did not accept it, then you have the ability, to waive your deductible up to that 25,000.
Okay. So that's number one.
Right. So that's the current option now, and then these are the new ones. So this first new option is that your deductible will be reduced 50% for the first claim of a policy period if the insured has been claim free for the 3 most recent complete policy periods with Swiss Re. And they define claim free as any claim that they've paid $5,000 or less in damages and expenses in excess of the deductible. So this is a really great benefit. If you've been claim free for at least 3 full policy terms, then your deductible could be reduced 50% right off the bat.
Yeah, which is a great enhancement.
Yes.
So,
yes.
All right, number 3.
Yes. So this one is the deductible will be reduced by, we have 2 different options here. So by 75% if the claim is settled before litigation has commenced, or by 50% if the claim is settled at first mediation after litigation has commenced. So these are also really great options too, depending on where you are in that claim process. If you have that ability to settle, where you could take advantage of one of these.
Okay. So again, folks, you had the original option, and now you have a couple more options
Right.
that you really need to, as you look at your program going forward,
Right.
especially those after February the 1st,
Mhm.
and see how you can best position yourself.
Right. And the claim adjusters, when you're dealing with any claim against your agency, the claim adjuster will be aware of these different options that you can utilize. So they'll be walking you through it of which
Exactly.
option,
Yep.
you're going to want to try and actually take advantage of.
Right. Again, questions, reach out to Amanda and the team, Kevin and Juan, and they'll be glad to walk you through some of this as well. So
Yeah.
as you look at your program going forward. So next up, we talked about acquisitions, and that's just, it is what it is. And part of that is extended reporting periods that are 99.9, I'd say 100% is required, that they have to have
Right.
this in place to finish the transaction of that acquisition. So extended reporting period updates.
Right. So what Westport has done here is they have reduced each tail provision option by 15 percentage points. So just basically cut the price by 15% for each tail option. They've also added an unlimited ERP or tail option. If you just want to sail off into the sunset and never have to worry about whether or not you have an old claim out there, you can get an unlimited tail policy now.
Yeah.
Kevin, because we see this quite frequently, and I don't think there's an end in sight, at least for the next 12 months. But what would be the best practice that we recommend from an E&O perspective, but also from a processing perspective of when agents should be contacting us, FAIA? You currently have a policy with us, and you need to see what these numbers look like. And again, folks, I know a lot of these transactions are under the cone of silence, and they certainly are very sensitive. But our team is very good at this, and so, but just from a processing standpoint, what are our recommend date timelines?
Great question. And just to echo Dave's comments, our team treats these ERP quote requests very confidential. We don't even tell other people in the building. So please know that we understand the sensitivity of this information, and we're not going to share it. We would like to be involved as soon as possible, because what we see all too often is agents wait until the week of, that they're about to close on the sale, and then we find out about it. So we really should be talking to you probably about 60 days out to, give you the quotes so you can put them in your budget. These tail provisions, they're not inexpensive. So you need to budget for them and see who's paying for it and how those funds are going to be handled. So I would say as soon as possible, but 60 days is what we'd really like to see.
Yeah, because as we've been describing, I mean, there are a lot of these transactions. So,
Right.
And we want you to be prepared. We want you to understand, where you're, as Kevin said, where it is in your budget that you have to look at from a transactional standpoint. So,
what a lot of people will forget is with these ERPs, the premium needs to be paid up front and in full. So you can't necessarily take the proceeds from
Right.
the sale and then pay for the ERP. It has to, when you want that ERP to go into effect, we need to get paid.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's part of the transaction that we're talking about.
Right.
And knowing that in advance, just like a home closing or a car financing or whatever, you want to know what those premium dollars are. So
Right.
Exactly.
And the only other thing I'll just add on that, just because I've had this question a couple of times, you'll get it to where the buyer may say to you, I want X, 3 or 5 year tail ERP endorsement on your policy. Some of them will ask for it to be provided at closing, which means prior to closing, you're canceling your policy and endorsing that ERP. So I just, I always recommend to folks not to cancel their policy until after that closing date, just on the off chance if the date is moved, if something falls through, because you are actually canceling your policy.
yeah, that's a great point because
Yeah.
you see it all the time
Right.
in home transactions.
Right.
So,
right.
and
it's usually once the seller goes back to the buyer to say, I'll be able to get you the ERP within X time frame after the closing. Usually that's sufficient for them and they don't have issues. But that's something also, like Kevin said, I mean, you want to contact us well in advance so we can kind of walk you through the whole process, tell you what are the different things that we recommend. But then these are discussions you can have.
okay.
Right.
And there's enough time for those.
And one more thing, we always get asked, how much tail should I buy?
Right.
And our recommendation, after speaking with Laura Pierce, our general counsel, is a 5-year tail, just to because of the statute of limitation laws that we have in
Mhm.
Florida, we recommend a 5-year tail, but that's certainly going to be your choice
Right.
of what to buy.
Yep.
Oh, and sorry, I just thought of
That's
one other thing.
that's a great point, because, you know, and you have to look at that,
Right.
you know, because I know Swiss Re has added an unlimited,
Right.
but that's certainly probably
I guess
not
that's
the-
going to be our recommendation now.
Right, right.
Unlimited.
Unlimited. But also going back to when we were talking earlier about acquisitions, something similar too. So if you're in the seat where you're the one buying the agency, make sure this is something you're looking at in the contract and requiring of, you know, who you're acquiring. Requiring of who you're acquiring. Because you do want to make sure that they're obtaining
Exactly.
scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, just like anything in insurance, folks, change is inevitable. So our friends at Swiss Re Westport have decided that a name change was the name of the game at this point. But yeah, they've decided to change the name. Certainly, everything else behind them is still the same.
Yes.
But they Amanda sits on the PLC for the national program, and so this was discussed. So Amanda will kind of walk us through. You know, I'm not going to ask about their thinking, but certainly their changing of the name.
Yes. Yes. So we've internally joked, you know, as we know, Westport, they know coverages, they've got carrier stability, and they know the E&O claims handling. We're still a little unsure on their naming. But as Dave said, we're not losing anything of what we already know about Westport. We've got the financial stability still. You've got Swiss Re as the parent company. We're not losing any of that. It's just strictly, you know, changing the name. And this is going to be actually a 2-step process. So first, if you're a current policyholder, you'll see this. So you'll get a notification about the change from Westport Insurance Company to North American Specialty Insurance Company, which is NAS. Then what they're going to do is file a name change of NAS to the final name, which is going to be Swiss Re Corporate Solutions America Insurance Corporation.
Whoo! That's a heck of a name.
So what we're going to really do going forward, you've heard us, you know, this entire presentation, we keep referring to Westport, so it's definitely going to be a adjustment for us to change how we reference that. But essentially, it's going to be the Swiss Re admitted form, which is what we know of Westport, and then the Swiss Re non-admitted form, which is what we know as for specialty. So again, you still have the parent company of Swiss Re backing everything, and we'll still reference it as Swiss Re, just admitted and non-admitted.
And so when will this likely take place?
So the move to North American Specialty Insurance Company is happening the same time as these enhancements. So that'll be effective 2/1.
Okay.
And then I'm not exactly sure the timing of when it'll go to the Swiss Re Corporate Solutions, really long name. But that'll happen soon after they'll file. Yeah,
but
a name change.
certificates that'll go out effective 2/1.
Yes.
Will have the new.
Right. They're going to have the NAS
Okay.
on it. Yes. Yes.
So again, just a reminder, you're probably going to have some entities that you do business with. They may question this. So please let us know, and we'll provide as much detail and documentation to make sure they're comfortable.
Right.
Because again, on the backside, it's still the same.
Right.
Everything from Swiss Re's standpoint.
Right.
But on the front side, it's a name change.
Right.
So just in case.
Yes.
All right. Well, as we wind this thing down, you know, we talked throughout this program today, Kevin and Amanda, about Swiss Re having an agent's back. And one of those things, and I've seen it firsthand many, many times as my years here at FAIA, is having this consultation with Swiss Re claim handlers, which by the way, folks, are attorneys.
Yes. Right.
So our friend Karen Mahoney is our Florida claims person, but you know, Amanda, just talk to us, or Kevin, talk to us about why it's important that if you do have a situation that you feel is a potential claim or a subpoena or something, that you get Karen involved on the front end?
Right. Great question. And like we were saying before, the worst thing you can do is stick your head in the sand. So we want you to notify us, and then we'll notify Swiss Re as soon as possible. We want them involved in a potential claim from day one. And they have more than likely have seen this exact situation 100 times,
Right.
and they know how to handle it. So, it's not going to cost you anything. Swiss Re will be happy to help you through that pre-claim consultation and just have your back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really the key. And that's unlike many of the others in the marketplace.
Right.
Swiss Re has always been there for this provision. They've always provided consultative services for agents that feel like they need to bounce something off someone.
Right. And it's never going to hurt you to report it.
Right.
If it doesn't turn into a claim, no harm, no foul.
Another provision that's up here, Kevin, is defense outside the limits. Why is this a big deal in a E&O policy?
Right. And we've seen a lot of carriers in this space that put the defense inside the limits, and that's just a big no-no in this field. Westport has defense outside the limits, and it's a big deal because these claims really aren't very short. They drag on for a year or 2 years. During the discovery period. So it's important that you have defense outside the limits because you don't want your attorney bills eroding your limit as you're going through this year-long claim.
Yeah. Well, the next one is something that we've discussed here internally and certainly with others about the broad definition of professional services, because I know agents get involved in some things and they want to make sure there's coverage for those entities and those processes and services they provide to their clients.
Right. And Westport provides a very broad definition of professional services. For that point, Dave, agents wear many different hats right now. So we have a very broad definition of professional services.
Yep. So pure claims made versus claims made and reported. This is a big deal. So
yes, most of the markets that are entering the E&O space for agencies, they're coming in with claims made and reported forms, which are a little bit more restrictive than a pure claims made form. So Westport is one of the few companies that still have that pure claims made form. It's less restrictive.
Yep. And talking about deductibles again, okay? And this comes up quite a bit, certainly on the property side. When you're going through the hurricane season, which we're about to end here in Florida, but, policies look at deductibles differently and how the aggregate plays. That's why some report claims. But aggregate deductible options, how does Westport treat this?
Right. So Westport does offer aggregate deductibles because, like you said, we're in a hurricane-prone state, and after the wind blows, that's where we see a lot of claims. And you usually don't have just one claim. You're going to have multiple E&O claims. And having this stopgap coverage, so you're not paying a deductible every claim, having this aggregate limit, it can be very helpful.
Right.
Yep. So we've already talked about insolvency coverage and subpoena coverage because there's a question that came in from Gabrielle on it, so it's right on point. If there is, I'll read it. Wanted to ask agents, ask for a subpoena for records and getting involved with an E&O claim. Later at renewal, will that be looked at as a claim which can be negatively affect your renewal? Amanda?
Short answer. No. We do. We do. You know, when we're looking at the renewal, we'll look at, as normal. We'll look at the claim history, and those claims are designated as subpoena claims, and we'll look at them to say, okay, this was just a subpoena. This was just a subpoena. So actually, it's kind of more so in your favor, because what Westport's going to look at is see, oh, well, they have a good history of reporting their claims. When it's, just a subpoena of records or things like that, and nothing actually came of it.
Okay.
So they'll actually look at that in favor of the insured.
Okay. Going back to professional services, our friend Kevin, Ed asks, can you give a couple of examples of what those could potentially be?
Yeah, just could be something like notary services. I know
Right.
we don't have
Fee-based services.
right.
If you do, fees in lieu of commissions, if you start doing any of that. And then you do have, outside of just the normal definition that's in the policy, Westport does have a lot of different endorsements if you do any other activities.
Real estate.
Right. If you do real estate, if you, for some reason, are doing, TPA services, third party administration, if you're brokering any business, you do want to make sure that that's included in your definition. So, the same thing will have some, because you may be an independent agent, but you may have one market that your friend, your agent next door does not have access to. So you may have a very small amount where you agree to basically broker it for them. So you want to make sure, if you have any of those different setups in place, that those are covered.
So question, what if you're preparing bid specs for an insurance proposal and you're, going out to the marketplace?
Mm-hmm.
That's a professional service that you're preparing something that now people will take those guidelines and go out to bid for those services.
Right.
Would that be considered a professional service where an agent is preparing certain bid specs? Or
I'd have to double check, but my initial thought is that because it is part of kind of a normal operation of being an insurance agent, my assumption would be yes, but I'd have to check on that.
All right.
Because I do know, I've heard that, from agents that they do that.
Yeah.
So I would assume that's kind of a normal standard. Westport would view that as a normal standard part of the process.
All right, here we go. So let's finish this up, and we're going to roll through some questions here. So stability of the carrier, we've talked about that. Nothing's changed there, Kevin and Amanda.
Right. But it is something
Swiss
to
Re,
be mindful of when you're looking at
is still that carrier that stands behind claims, stands behind agents, stands behind their coverage forms, and certainly what you've seen today and heard about today is these enhancements. And folks, just a reminder, this is stuff that goes ongoing. This is stuff that Amanda and the PLC from a national basis looks at. This is stuff that they get questions from agents around the country that they say, oh, should we consider this or that? So they take this seriously. They look at this stuff all the time. They see where trends are going and seeing how they can continue to support independent agents in this program. So let's show Kevin Mangan, our friend here that's live, and then Juan that's down in the South Florida territory. So these are the two gentlemen that you're dealing with from your E&O sales perspective. There's their contact information. If you have any questions, we can certainly get you in touch with either one of them. But thought we'd show you their picture.
Two faces for radio.
That's so. All right, so let's go back to the hammer clause, and then we have a couple more questions. So with the elimination of the agent, would not back to the hammer clause. So with the elimination, the agent would not be liable for the overage.
Correct. The carrier would have to pick up the overage of that, what could have been settled.
Okay.
So Westport.
Yep. All right. What if our client is involved in a claim and a third party entity is requesting the documents, for instance, a public adjuster? What is our obligation, and when do we have a legal obligation to provide documents, if any? Would we only be required to release documents when we are subpoenaed by the courts?
That's a great question, and it comes up quite a bit.
Chris, great question.
Great.
You get a star, Chris.
Got a star, gold star. And that's exactly the reason why we want you to notify Westport, because again, they have claims attorneys on staff that can look at that individual situation and let you know what your obligations are.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, Chris, and I know some of this, report, but for this presentation, that's really the key to this. And we certainly have somebody from Westport on the call. We're not going to unmute him and put him on the spot, but certainly I'm sure he's shaking his head down there, because we've just, unfortunately or fortunately, we've seen it too many times where people have kind of pushed at arm's length and they've said, oh, it'll just go away, or because it's a third party, I don't have to get involved. I don't like a public adjuster. I don't like, a third party intervention. And I know that's what we're up against here in Florida, but seriously, get us involved, get Westport involved, have that conversation. They can certainly guide you, put you in a position to be responsive, and then give you the do's and don'ts, because I know it can be overwhelming at times when you receive some of these things by a court service in your office.
Right. And again, it's not going to count against you.
Yep. Well, good. Chris, you're absolutely welcome, Chris. So, but anything else, folks, as we wind this down, I think we've pretty much touched on anything. And here's what we're also going to do. Everybody was on this call today. Kevin and Amanda are going to put together an email, and they'll see the questions that came in as well. And if we need to address anything further, we will in that email. And I want to thank you all for being here this morning. This is certainly very important to you. It's very important to us. Can you talk about the pricing changes for 2022?
There will be no pricing changes for 2022. So these are just strictly enhancements that are coming out. There's no additional pricing, and like Kevin mentioned earlier, Westport actually had a rate decrease a few years within the last few years.
Yep.
2 years ago now, yeah. So we had rate decrease and we have enhancements, and it's one of the great benefits. They don't expect additional rate just to implement
to enhance the policy,
to implement these enhancements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Ed, I think that's your question. I think you got some stability there.
No, and I mean, sorry, I'll add too. I mean, as Kevin mentioned earlier, I mean, this program is performing very well, and that's why they did make the decision that they have the ability to.
Well, it just goes to show you the loss control's working.
Right. It is, and that
us browbeating you daily about it, but seriously, the documentation that Amanda talked about earlier,
right?
The responsiveness, the ability to have somebody have your back if you run awry of the regulatory body or a third party person, and I think that really speaks for itself in volumes, because that's why we've been able to sustain these lower than average losses.
Right.
So, all right, folks. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for the comments about this, providing this good information to you all. We wish you a great weekend. Enjoy some football.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can do anything, certainly reach out to us here at FAI, and specifically the E&O department.
Yes.
They are here to help. They're here to answer questions and be responsive to your needs as you're looking not only currently at your program, but maybe looking at Westport as an option in the future. So we thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Kevin.
Yes.
Have a great weekend, folks.
Yes.
And Dave Newell signing off.